Hey friends, welcome back to my channel with me, Olive, and my lovely guest, Lucy B.
Hey.
We're going to be talking today about the role that diet culture has within the yoga space and how it kind of interlinks with the practice of ahimsa. So, Lucy, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, so I'm Lucy. I'm a yoga teacher. I've been teaching for 7 years. And I first trained as a teacher and was living in a bigger body and was in a period of disordered eating and felt very rejected from the yoga space, and then left yoga for a while. Came back a bit later when I had a less disordered relationship with food and movement, and sort of noticed that my experience of not feeling welcome in the space because my body was something that was maybe around a little bit too much still. And yeah, me and Olive connected over that and our hate of diet culture, I would say, and our experiences in the yoga space. And we wanted to talk about that a little bit more, in a little bit more depth.
Yeah, just to kind of like sort of reiterate what Lucy was saying, like we've both kind of come from the same understanding of why it's so prevalent within the yoga space and why it sort of deeply affects everyone, but it's so just not spoken about as openly as we would like it to. And yeah, just for context, like I kind of entered the yoga world with this very disordered understanding of eating and my body, and yoga did perpetuate it for a very, very long time. Until I started to actually teach and facilitate holding a space, and then the narrative and my understanding started to change around it. But it took me to do that.
No one in the yoga space was going to help you to do that. And I think also with ahimsa being a practice of non-violence, it's also been generalized a lot to things that actually have become very harmful. I think like to practice ahimsa meaning to be vegan, to practice to ahimsa being not overeating or not eating bad foods. And that simplification is, I think, incredibly damaging to people who are especially in a disordered place or are recovering from a disordered place.
Yeah, definitely. And it's too simplistic to reduce it down to what the individual eats, because again, it's very much your interpretation of what ahimsa means to you, but also fully understanding and being honest with yourself if what your interpretation is actually doing more harm than good. So again, for like context and understanding, I was vegan for like 4 years, and I was like, oh yeah, ahimsa, it's great, like non-violence, compassion towards other beings. But in the background of all of this, I was doing more harm to myself. I was making myself sicker and sicker, despite supplementing and eating enough food. I wasn't doing myself a service, and I was providing violence to me. So it's like, okay, hang on, this isn't the practice of ahimsa in its totality then.
Yeah, and I think a lot of wellness really is one size fits all sort of model that we're given, where we go, oh, this is what it looks to be well. We are vegan, we exercise this amount, we don't drink, or like all of these things, and it's this one size fits all box that if you can't fit into, and most of us can't because it's so narrow, you feel very like you're not good enough, or you don't feel like you're doing a good enough job, or you're not being like the yoga teacher you're meant to be, which then again is not a nice feeling. It's not a kind, it's not a generous feeling towards yourself, which isn't gonna translate you into being kind to yourself, which ultimately is what we would like everyone to do.
100%. And it even boils down to the other principles within sort of more Ayurveda and like the sattvic diet. And I've had multiple people sort of say to me like, oh, you shouldn't eat this because it's not good for your body type and all of this. I'm like, yes, but that applies to that period of time in the East. It doesn't apply right now to the West and the body that I am living in and the climate and the environment that I am in here. And I understand it's within sort of keeping like traditions. But we also have to,
but also if you want to do that for you. But I think what we have a problem with in wellness is that people think they know what is best for other people because they've experienced it for themselves. And we need to remember, I think, if we're working in wellness, that we don't know what's the best for everyone. Everyone knows their body the best. Everyone knows what works for them the best. And I think sometimes we are judgmental when we believe there's one right way, which is not a helpful not a helpful
No.
practice.
And that kind of leads us on to this whole idea that a lot of teachers, whether they themselves put themselves on that like guru kind of pedestal, or the students kind of put them on that pedestal as well, and being like, you know everything, so tell me everything I need to do, like tell me all the answers to X, Y, and Z. And I think there is like a new wave of teachers coming through where we're like, I am not the guru, we're on the same level, we're just here to facilitate the space and the practice. But there is this underlying like current of misunderstanding that the teacher knows all.
Yeah. And also I think it's about spaces being, when a space isn't inclusive, you feel like you have to fit into the idea of that space. And sometimes that can be a really like out there, you know, teachers telling students that they need to lose weight, or these are the best postures to lose weight. And it can be like a very outwardly violent thing, but also it can be a very like understated or neutral, like if you're not giving variations in a class that suit different body types, you're sort of undercurrently giving the message that you need to look a certain way or be a certain size to then be able to participate in the class properly. So it's not even sometimes being so directly uninclusive. I think we need to think about inclusivity in a much bigger and broader and investigate it a lot more to make sure there's no one that we are leaving out the space, because we've all been brought up in the yoga world which doesn't take these things into consideration. And I think, of course, we're making mistakes, and of course that's all happening, but we need to remember that we need to include everyone. And if we're not including them, we're not going to make them feel welcome, and that might make them feel like they need to change themselves to be in the space, which I definitely have felt multiple times in different yoga spaces.
Yeah, of course. And I can imagine like just how like intimidating that must feel as well, to be like a professional and to not be welcome in the space where you know.
And then you have the flip side of that is spaces wanting to come across as more inclusive and therefore being like, please, we don't have any teachers in bigger bodies, can you come and get involved? And sometimes that's great, and people coming from like a genuine place of change, and sometimes it feels very tick boxy, and then you are the only teacher that's not teaching like Ashtanga, dynamic vinyasa and rocket, and it can feel quite uncomfortable to navigate, because you kind of, that representation, even if it's coming from a sort of iffy, questionable place, it's still good that it's there for the students, but also I want to work in spaces that reflect my morals and values, which is
definitely, it does sometimes feel a little bit like tokenism, and I have experienced that as well from like being more of a like person of color. I feel like I've only been invited to teach in this space because I bring a level of diversity, and it's a real tricky thing to navigate. Like you said, you're like, am I actually welcome here for my skill set as a teacher, or are you just trying to tick boxes off? And the thing is as well, like having such a diverse like teaching background encourages diverse students to come through, which is what I wish I saw more of when I first started my yoga journey. Like majority of my yoga journey kind of started through Instagram, but it was the same body type that I saw. And I was like, damn, I don't look like that when I do a handstand. Why don't I look like that exact body and that exact shape?
And when you do have like every teacher that looks the same, even if all those teachers are inclusive and brilliant teachers, and even if the space is brilliant and inclusive, it does send a messaging that you need to look a certain way to be here. Like, and that really is where it gets like sticky, and it's, you know, it's like the really famous Dove campaign where they first had all the different types of beautiful. And obviously that campaign is not a great one, and there's lots of reasons for that, but also it was the beginning of this marketing becoming more inclusive. We want different size models, we want people with disabilities, we don't want everyone to be white. Like it begins this inclusivity wave, but it comes from often a place that's not very genuine and very good, and that can, when you're in the middle of that, I worked on a campaign where I was the only bigger size person there, and I was definitely there for inclusivity, and they didn't have the right size clothing for me. And then I had to like be in the campaign with things clipped to me to like keep the clothing on. And, you know, it's stuff that I know better now. I'm older, wiser, and all of that stuff. But I think disordered eating is one part of the way that ahimsa has been forgotten in some of the physical yoga spaces, but the smaller elements of that, I think, are about inclusivity and creating more inclusive spaces where people don't feel the need to change their body, change their patterns, be a certain way to be in the space. And I think then you're also bringing in things outside of that are reasons that people don't feel included. And a space where everyone looks the same is never going to be an inclusive space, and it's never going to be a space where everyone feels welcome and held, which is what we should be aiming for.
Yeah, definitely. And a teacher who makes it less about the pose and more about the experiential value that you gain from it is like a small way that you can be more inclusive.
Completely.
And I think in the West, it's just been so far removed from what the practice obviously originally was. It's become all about the posture, all about XYZ, all about, look this way to like the amount of crap out there. It's like yoga's for a sexy bum and abs. It's like, how have we taken it to this level? And, yoga as a fitness class as opposed to an embodied kind of practice, and the way that it's been marketed so heavily in the West is so far removed. And of course it's going to be like influenced with diet culture. And even like larger brands are starting to improve and have wider, diversity with their models, which is great, but it's also like it's coming a little bit late.
Yeah, and I think some of the brands you can see are really working with the people in bigger bodies about the experience that they have in the product, and are really getting involved in like a really genuine seeming way. But then some people are just whacking up the sizes and not doing fit models, and it really, you can tell the brands that care. And hopefully, I think that's the thing also of like putting your money with brands that are trying to do better, or are like engaging in the conversation very least. Like your money has power in that way. And I think sometimes we don't know what we can do to support people who aren't being included. And I think going to studios which are hiring a more diverse teaching staff is a great way to do that. Buying things from brands that have like a more extended clothing size range, if like you financially can. There are all these things that you can do to be supporting people that will make everything a little bit better for everyone in the end. Down the road at some point.
Definitely. But even down to like, the 200-hour teacher training you do, you're trained to give adjustments and understand the asana practice on yoga bodies.
Completely.
What is a yoga body? A thin, abled individual. And like, I walked away from my teacher training being like, I'm super comfortable adjusting this one specific type of individual. I'm going to have no idea how to do that to the general population when I come back. And it's like, how am I then able to provide a safe, non-violent space if not even my training can provide that?
I think teacher trainings, they're starting to catch up about these things, but it's taken a lot of time. And also, this is in no way negative to the people who are on the teacher trainings, but a lot of teacher training students turn up thinking about yoga only as the physical practice, because that's the experience we have of yoga in the West, and that's what the studios are doing. And of course that means people turn up thinking that's all they're going to learn about. It's that students should be doing their own research, but also we've got to think about what's around them and what they're digesting. So of course that stereotype is being perpetuated because people aren't breaking out of it, and people aren't making it bigger. Well, they're starting to, but it takes time. And then we also have all these teachers that have been teaching for a long time who were never taught about that, and now are having to learn about it. And of course that's going to take time as well. And I for my most part, I find teachers to be really engaged in wanting to make their practice safer for all bodies, more inclusive. But it is a change, and it is going to take time. And then I think some people are don't like the change from the tradition, which I absolutely do understand. But also, we are living here and now with the bodies we have here and now, and we want to be serving the humans that are here and now in a way that is kind.
Yeah, definitely. And the only like hypocritical thing I find with like very traditionalist kind of teachers is like, but if you understood the origins of where it came from and who, the demographic yoga was presented to, it's so far away anyways from what you think the tradition is. So it's like, you may as well adapt.
Yeah.
Sounds harsh, but you know.
No, but I think we should be always adapting. I am someone who believes to be myself an inclusive teacher, but I'm constantly learning things in ways I could be more inclusive. Or I have a student that I don't have anything in my wheelhouse to be a variation for, and we have to work to find one that works for them.
Yeah.
Like, it's constant, the evolution. Like, we also should always be wanting to be improving as teachers and facilitators and people who hold space, and, you know, improving our anatomy knowledge and improving our philosophy knowledge. Like, we always should want to be evolving to be able to provide the best we can without, you know, putting too much stress on that as well.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's quite a nice note to leave it on.
Okay.
But yeah.
Thanks.
But thank you for all your wisdom and all your knowledge.
Thanks, man. Thanks for asking me to come here.
It's been an absolute pleasure. But yes, if you want to engage with either of our channels, I'll put everything in the description below. But yes, thank you very much, Lucy.
Thanks, babe.
See you guys soon.